Hey there, Jordan Chariton live. It is Wednesday, May 11th, the year 2022. Delighted to be joined by Tina-Desiree Berg out in City of Angels, Los Angeles. How you doing, Tina?
Good. Happy to be here.
Tina, we have very serious things to discuss, but full disclosure, I am going to shamelessly call for pity super chats today. As those that have asked, Jordan, are you wearing pants underneath that desk? I am here to show you I am wearing pants and a knee brace, which is very hard to walk in. I have not confirmed yet, but the doctor thinks I tore my meniscus, which is around your kneecap, apparently. I hurt my knee a couple of weeks ago cycling, and I iced it and rested it and all that stuff and put CBD lotion on it. But I got an x-ray today and there was some issues. So now I'm going for an MRI, and it's not fun, but
no,
relatively speaking, I'm doing okay compared to what we're about to talk to. So feel free to drop those pity super chats in. It'll make me feel better. And this thing is a bitch to walk around in too, especially when your dog is pulling you. My lovely Millie. Anyway, smash that like button, share this live stream. The more people that press like and share, the more people that will see. By the way, you'll get double of myself and Tina, 5:45 Eastern. So in 45 minutes, we'll be on Call-In, the live podcasting podcast, talking Roe versus Wade, and frankly, how the Democratic Party's spinelessness helped expedite the overturning of Roe v. Wade. We'll get into the Republicans too. So that's at 5:45. Download the app, Call-In, CALLIN, and follow at Status Coup, and you'll get an alert when we're live. You could literally call in to the show. So it's a lot of fun. So let's start with the obvious. Al Jazeera journalist, Palestinian American journalist, Shireen Abu Akleh, hope I'm pronouncing that right. She was killed, shot in the head by Israeli soldiers in the occupied West Bank earlier. I'm going to read from the article, but I think better to just show the video. It's a little graphic. YouTube will probably demonetize this right away, but important to show this. So this is from Al Jazeera. It's long, but we're going to show you the whole thing.
We made ourselves clear to the army and the passers-by, indicating that we are the press. Then within seconds there was the first shot. I told them that we are being targeted, we are being shot at. I turned and found Shireen on the ground. I found Shatha shielding herself by a tree and screaming. I turned and found Shireen on the ground in the first few seconds with the shooting, and we were telling each other that we were being shot at. The shooting continued for more than 3 minutes on the teams that were there.
هذه المسيرة هي المسيرة 25 إحياء لذكرى النكبة، فيما يحتفل الإسرائيليون في ذكرى تأسيس إسرائيل، يحيي الفلسطينيون ذكرى نكبتهم.
We were going to film the Israeli army operation, and suddenly they shot us without asking us to leave or stop filming. The first bullet hit me, and the second bullet hit Shireen. They killed her in cold blood because they are killers and specialize in killing only Palestinian people.
So they claimed that some Palestinian militants were there.
We had no resistance, and there was no Palestinian military resistance at all at the scene.
Killing journalists, shooting the messenger, is equivalent to a war crime. So we need to know what has happened. The world needs to know what has happened.
It has been shown that, Israeli forces kill Palestinians, including Palestinian journalists, without cause in the occupied territory. And it's extremely rare that Israeli soldiers, captains, or military officials are ever held accountable for their actions. So it's ironic that the foreign minister says that journalists must be protected when you're talking about journalism in Palestine. Israel is the biggest perpetrator of crimes against journalists in the West Bank.
Okay, so that's the video from Al Jazeera. I just want to read a little bit from Al Jazeera's comment. And this was Al Jazeera's first female reporter in the field. She started in the 90s. Israeli forces shot Abu Akleh in the head while she was on assignment in Jenin in the occupied West Bank. Abu Akleh, a longtime TV correspondent for Al Jazeera Arabic, was killed on Wednesday while covering Israeli army raids in the city of Jenin in the northern occupied West Bank. She was rushed to a hospital in Jenin in critical condition, where she was declared dead. She was 51 years old. So let's show the Israeli response, which is just literally not believable. This is a spokesperson for the Israeli Foreign Ministry, if you have that comment.
Saddened by the death of senior Al Jazeera correspondent Shireen Abu Akleh during heavy exchange of fire amidst a military counter-terrorism operation in Jenin. Free press is fundamental for Israel and for all democracies, and as such, journalists must be protected. There are indications that Ms. Abu Akleh was killed by Palestinian terrorists' fire. Israel will be conducting a thorough investigation. We call on the Palestinian Authority to cooperate with this investigation in order to get to the truth.
Yes, we'll be investigating ourselves, and we'll get you the truth. And this is Yair Lapid, who is the foreign minister in Israel. We have offered the Palestinians a joint pathological investigation into the sad death of journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. Journalists must be protected. You know what I think of when I hear that, Tina?
No.
The autopsy of JFK, when the Pentagon officials were literally like hovering over the autopsy officials. We don't need to.
What they couldn't say in the report. Yeah.
Right. So it's obviously absurd. And I want Tina, you sent me this. So Colin, if we could skip around to this.
Well, I just thought this was interesting because this is a human rights organization, an Israeli human rights organization there. And the fact that they took the time to do the location for where they're claiming these militants were and where the journalists were, it just shows that it's an absolute lie.
So Colin, I sent that to you. Of course, I can't find what I sent you. 1 second. Let's show that tweet thread. I have it now. This is from Beit Salem. This morning, Beit Salem's field researcher in Jenin documented the exact locations in which the Palestinian gunmen depicted in a video distributed by the Israeli army fired, as well as the exact location in which journalist Shireen Abu Akleh was killed. So if you go down to this one, documentation of Palestinian gunfire distributed by Israeli military cannot be the gunfire that killed journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. And they say that because if you look at the geolocation map, at the top there is where the Palestinian American journalist was killed. And very far, very, very far away is the location of armed Palestinian firing that was distributed.
And note, there is a response underneath that. And I can't remember if it's who it's
Colin,
from, but it's somebody.
Colin, can you full screen that? Because they can't see.
Somebody from the Israeli government responded to them with some hogwash.
Right. So that top one is where Abu Akleh was killed, and very far away beneath that is where Palestinian gunfire was going off. Hold on 1 second. Oh, yeah. So where did it? Oh, I also want to show this. if you have this one, this is from Mirav Zonsin. Israel police went to Shireen Abu Akleh's home to ask they take down Palestinian flags hung outside. Yes, that's right. And if you see the video there, Colin, could you play that video even though? So, Tina, here we have a journalist who had a press vest on.
Yeah, a really clear one as well.
Right.
Like, there's no way you could mistake her for not being press.
Right.
No way.
With a helmet on, by the way.
Yeah.
You have other journalists who are with her saying there was no Palestinians shooting around them. It was only them, saying that they told the Israeli officers they were press and then got shot at.
Yeah.
I have no reason to believe these Al Jazeera reporters would be not telling the truth. Al Jazeera has a pretty good record in terms of reporting. So it seems to me she was shot in the head intentionally.
It's intentional, absolutely.
And
I don't know how you could derive any other conclusion from this.
And also going to her home to ask them to lower the Palestinian flags, which, I mean, I'm not a foreign affairs reporter, but you told me that reporter who put that out is very credible.
Yeah, she's very credible. I would absolutely believe anything on her live feed or on her Twitter feed. Also, I thought it was really an interesting point that they were making about free press. I wouldn't qualify Israel as having a free press, Jordan, because when you're a reporter there, you have to clear everything you print through the IDF to begin with. You file with the IDF before you file with your editor. I've been told this by multiple journalists there. So right there is an affront to free press, in my opinion, right at the start. So,
and I want to show, this is basically the equivalent of the thoughts and prayers you get after mass shootings here. But this is from Ned Price, who's the State Department spokesperson in America. We are heartbroken by and strongly condemn the killing of American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh in the West Bank. The investigation must be immediate and thorough, and those responsible must be held accountable. Her death is an affront to media freedom everywhere. Yes, media freedom you care about as you keep Julian Assange tortured in a UK prison. And, who's investigating? We're trusting Israel to investigate itself? Give me a break. This is the equivalent of, the police are investigating here in America. Jen Psaki, before she goes to her MSNBC gig, she tweeted out basically the same thing. We're heartbroken to learn the killing of Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh and injuries to producer Ali Samodi today in the West Bank. Send our condolences, blah, blah, blah. A little lower, we call for immediate and thorough investigation and full accountability, blah, 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 blah. And I thought this was an interesting tweet. This is from Hind Hassan. If a journalist is shot and killed in front of multiple journalists who all say there were no armed Palestinian present, just Israeli forces who fired at them, then that is enough. Enough for journalists and headline writers to not mention clashes. Rest in power, Shireen Abu Akleh. And I thought that's an important point because let's face it, Tina, if this happened in, I don't know, New York City or DC or wherever, and a bunch of journalists were reporting what they saw of the killing of another journalist, it would be reported based on the eyewitness journalists, not as the New York Times put out this headline, Al Jazeera journalist is killed in West Bank. Well, what was she taking a stroll? The sub-headline, the network and Palestinian authorities blamed Israeli troops for the killing. Israel said the blame could lie with the Palestinian gunmen. So, Tina, the New York Times, who has more resources than God, we don't know. We have people in Jerusalem. We have people in the West Bank. We could surmise who is at fault relatively quickly, but you figure it out because that's the he said, she said journalism. I mean, it's pretty disgusting. Listen, I mean, my father is. Oh, your mic went out. Hold on. Can't hear you.
You're muted on StreamYard, Tina.
Tina in tech. While she comes back, I mean, it's very clear what happened here, but you're getting. Oh, I think we hear it.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I have no idea why that happened. I think it's kind of a little bit low or off too. I don't know. StreamYard. Hello.
I was saying, Tina, it's very clear what happened here, and essentially, I mean, the U.S. Spokesperson, press secretary are just checking the backs. There's not going to be a real investigation here. They're just going to check the boxes and be done with it.
Right. There's not going to be any justice, no real investigation. And honestly, the New York Times has an absolutely horrific record on reporting on Israel and Palestine. They are just always with these headlines where you're like, that's really not very accurate, but okay. It's like they want to constantly beat the war drums for the conflict in the region. I just don't know why that is, but that has absolutely been the history with the New York Times.
Absolutely. And what's amazing about this is, I mean, this journalist, it has been a journalist for Al Jazeera since the 90s. Like the IDF knows who she is. Sure, she was wearing a helmet, this and that, but she's been around. I mean, you've seen her at covering protests, this and that. She was well respected as the first female field reporter they had. And according to the other journalists there, they identified themselves clearly. So what can you call this other than intentional terrorism? I mean,
I think it's intentional terrorism. But, you know, here's the interesting thing. There's this great book that I would recommend, Jordan. I don't know if you've read it. It's Miko Palah's book, The General's Son. He's Israeli. His father was one of the original Israeli generals there. And he talks in great length about what it's like in the West Bank, what it was like growing up inside, you know, that circle. And he's very, very frank and honest about what he experienced and what he saw. And based on like the picture that he paints, it's easy to believe that some of these IDF soldiers would be that radicalized that they would actually shoot a Palestinian journalist. Like, it sounds really appalling to an American. And it is appalling. I'm not saying it's not. It absolutely is. But I always try to understand, like, what is going on in that environment that would bring somebody to do something so atrocious. Right. And it's, you know, so I think really at some point Israel is going to have a conversation about what's going on with the state of affairs there, with the mentality that's being created by all the militarization, all the hatred of the Palestinians, all the othering that goes on, the apartheid. Like, the environment is just really, really not great at this point.
Right. And by the way, I mean, Netanyahu was horrendous, but as you pointed out off air, the new Israeli prime minister.
He's worse. You know, Naftali Bennett is to the right of Bibi, and I don't know if a lot of people realize that. So Naftali Bennett, he's always been pro settlements. Like, he's like rah, more settlements, take over the entire West Bank. You know, he wants to annex the entire Area C. So for folks that don't know Area C, that's like 60% of the West Bank. And he was one of the original founders of Home Party, which is a neo-fascist, very right-wing party. He's now part of this like coalition now. I think it's called Yamina or something like this. But, you know, he's trying to coalition build on the right. And he's also trying to sell himself as not as extreme as what his past has been. But he's very extreme. And he's made a lot of racist statements in his lifetime.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, I hate to say it. I mean, I do what I do in America because I do believe there's a chance for change. And I do have some hope. I know others don't, but I go out and cover things because I believe if people come together, change can happen. I don't really feel that way in Israel. And this is somebody, you know, I'm pretty open. My dad is a super Zionist. He thinks Israel could do no wrong. He loved Trump only because Trump moved the embassy. He's one of those. I love him. I mean, we don't agree on Israel. I don't even talk to him about it because it's not worth it. I'll get a 2-hour lecture. I mean, my wife's Israeli. She's got family there. I love my wife. I love her family. But you know, it would be the equivalent of like, you're anti-American if you criticize America. Well, that's ridiculous. Right. And Israel is indiscriminately killing journalists, not to mention the amount of people they've killed in Gaza, in what I view is very disproportionate reactions. That doesn't
completely disproportionate. But I mean, it goes back to this thing where that's why I'm saying they have to have some sort of conversation about where the society is at. I mean, the fact that they've been able to create this sort of hospora where you cannot criticize the state of Israel. If you do, you're a traitor, has been very detrimental, I think. And it happens in the United States, it happens in Europe, and it happens in Israel. Like, nobody's allowed to produce any relevant criticism. Otherwise, they get called a traitor. And it's really problematic because no state is above criticism. And in this particular case, we're seeing how extreme things have been getting for decades now, and still people are afraid to say anything. I think it's a problem. Also, for folks that want to learn more about this, we did that interview with Ronnie Barkin last year. Ronnie is, born and raised in Tel Aviv. He's Israeli Jewish, and he gave us a really frank description and was really upfront about some of the things that are going on there. And I think it's really informative for Americans to hear that, because they never hear that side of the story. Our media here in the United States simply doesn't, they won't give any credence to that sort of viewpoint. So.
Right. And I think it's also important to point out, first of all, we don't have a democracy in America either. Princeton, was it Princeton? I think Princeton in 2014, they did a study, concluded we have an oligarchy because 50% of the time legislation matches what donors want, not us. And us, very, 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 very little of the time does the popular majority and what we want actually get passed in legislation. Well, you turn to Israel. I mean, it's not a secret. They surveil journalists. They surveil activists. They, like you said, I think they only have 1 or 2 news channels.
And you file with the IDF. The IDF has to be okay. And in fact, one of the things Ronnie told me about was this whole process you go through, which is really, to me, that's no longer a free press. If you don't have a separation between the press and the government, if they're having to give you the okay before you print something, that's not free press. It's not, by definition.
Right. So, I mean, bottom line, investigation. I mean, this will be outraged for a few days, and then by next week, Israel will move on, and the same shit will happen. Yeah. And we're not even discussing. I mean, Israel said they had an operation in this refugee camp. Well, what is the operation in a refugee camp that you're calling these refugees? That you're calling these refugees terrorists? So
right. Well, but that's just the language, right? Every Palestinian is a terrorist. In fact, one of the most famous Naftali Bennett quotes was how. Somebody had asked him, would you be willing to kill the children if they were trying to cross? He was talking about the line between Gaza and Israel. And his response is, they are not children, they are terrorists.
Right.
I mean, how could you have that kind of viewpoint that it's shocking.
Before we move on, I just want to play this. This is Al Jazeera. If you have this, it's a video in a tweet column. Quote, I was able to convey the people's message and voice. Not long before her killing by Israeli occupation forces, Al Jazeera correspondent Shireen Abu Akleh spoke about her career and what it meant to her to report on the occupation. It's not in English, but there's subtitles, and I thought this would be important to show.
لن أنسى أبدا حجم الدمار ولا الشعور بأن الموت كان أحيانا على مسافة قريبة. لم نكن نرى بيوتنا. كنا نحمل الكاميرات ونتنقل عبر الحواجز العسكرية والطرق الوعرة. كنا نبيت في مستشفيات أو عند أناس لم نعرفهم. ورغم الخطر كنا نصر على مواصلة العمل. كان ذلك خلال عام 2002 حين تعرضت الضفة الغربية لاجتياح لم تعهده منذ احتلال عام 67. في اللحظات الصعبة تغلبت على الخوف. فقد اخترت الصحافة كي أكون قريبة من الإنسان. ليس سهلا ربما أن أغير الواقع، لكنني على الأقل كنت قادرة على إيصال ذلك الصوت إلى العالم. أنا شيرين أبو عقلة.
And one more thing, just to like the resistance howlers that were decrying, Jim Acosta and journalists of his ilk, they're under attack by Trump, and journalists are really under attack because Trump said bad words to them. Journalists like Shireen Abu Akleh are actually under attack and risking their lives every day, and journalists in Ukraine right now. But she's not the first journalist to die in the West Bank, in Gaza. There's been countless others, many of whom we don't know their names. They haven't gotten the coverage. So, not to say Trump was a friend of journalists. Frankly, neither is Biden, even though they pretend he is. But, the people like Shireen Abu Akleh are really risking their lives every day. Anything else before we move on, Tina?
No, I agree with that sentiment.
Absolutely. So really tragic. And
also, I guess I would add one more thing. Shooting a journalist in a war zone or in an occupied area is considered a war crime. It just is. Right.
Absolutely. But, in terms of the scoreboard of war crimes, it seems that the referees aren't looking in terms of
the United States and not when it comes to Israel. And this is true. There's a reason that these two countries don't join the ICC.
Right. Absolutely. Everybody smash that like button. We got 260 people watching. 200 have pressed the like button. Another story that, to me, I'm not down with this. Another 40 billion we've now earmarked for Ukraine. No questions on how to pay for this, obviously, but plenty of questions on how to pay for COVID testing and vaccines. By the way, for those that have been told the COVID pandemic is over, literally all I see all day on Twitter now is people posting their positive tests. And by the way, I was just at an event where two of my family members tested positive. Fortunately, so far I've tested negative, but this new variant is spreading like wildfire, yet we can't find the funding for that. Yet lickety split, right. we just gave another 40 billion to Ukraine. This from the New York Times. House passes 40 billion more in Ukraine aid with few questions asked. Very, very nice, New York Times. The escalating brutality of the war in Ukraine has dampened voices on both the right and left, skeptical of the United States' involvement itself in armed conflict overseas, fueling a rush by Congress to pour huge amounts of money into a potential lengthy and costly offensive. The House on Tuesday night passed a $40 billion military and humanitarian package for Ukraine in an overwhelming 368 to 57 vote, weeks after lawmakers overwhelmingly approved $13.6 billion in emergency aid for the war effort. That total, roughly $53 billion over 2 months, goes beyond what Biden requested and is poised to amount to the largest foreign aid package to move through Congress in at least 2 decades. Of note, the 57 that voted no were Republicans. All the war hawk Democrats voted for it. The squad voted for it. As far as I know, every squad member voted for this. Yeah. I care. I mean, we've covered Ukraine, I think, often. We've paid for footage from Ukraine, even that hasn't gotten a ton of views, just because we think it was important to show the humanitarian crisis, innocents getting killed. Yeah. I feel terrible for the people of Ukraine. Russia, we've already gone through caveats and the history of NATO. That doesn't condone what Putin has done. I find it absolutely disgusting. These so-called leftists on YouTube basically giving Vladimir Putin like a blowjob and like very uber, like, oh, Ukraine's at fault for this, not Putin who went in. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. That doesn't mean that we disregard Russians who have been killed in the Donbass over the last several years.
No, not at all. Both things can be true at the same time. I mean, there could still have been a coup. There still could be, ultra-nationalists and neo-Nazis there. There could still be an ongoing civil war. Like, all of those things it's a complex situation, but to pretend that Putin's a good guy is absolutely patently absurd.
Right. Like this fucking idiot, Jackson Hinkle. I'm sorry. Let's just say what it is. He's like selling Z shirts or something like that. I don't see this. Yeah. Wow. It's gross. It's gross. And he's calling it a Russian operation. So yeah. Anyway, it's gross. But by the way, there are Nazis in Ukraine. Guess what? There's Nazis in the Russian military too. Guess what? There's a whole
in the American military. I mean,
there's a lot of neo-Nazis in the American military. Doesn't mean America is a Nazi country. No, doesn't mean Ukraine is a Nazi country.
Yeah, it means that all of the ultra-nationalists, all of the neo-Nazis, the fascists, whatever, they exist everywhere in the world, and we should be concerned with fighting them across the board, period, end of story, and not viewing them as like attached to any one country because it's a global movement.
Right. But to me, broader point, at a certain point, you're only prolonging the war by continually rubber stamping 10 million this week, now 40 billion. Zelensky has already basically said the United States needs to do more in terms of trying to negotiate here and trying to find a solution.
A peaceful solution.
But it doesn't seem to me like the United States wants to do that. You don't really hear much.
Weapons. The arms manufacturers in this country want to sell weapons. I mean, all of this is about money. And I also think it's important to realize that he separated this Ukrainian package from other things. Like there was the COVID relief that was going to be voted on with this. And he separated them so they could fast track the Ukrainian one. So I think that's a bad look. I mean, you're basically saying we're going to ignore COVID now. And you've been saying that once. Right. We know COVID's not over. You know, you've decided that we don't have to report, all of the COVID infections, what have you anymore, which is a huge mistake. How are we supposed to track this now? And now he's also saying, out of the other side of his mouth, there might be 100 million infections in the fall from this new variant.
Right. Colin, can we fix the audio?
Is it still weird?
Something happened with your audio and then it affected mine. Hold on. Go to the bathroom.
I don't hear an audio issue, so I'm trying to.
Oh, okay. I think it's a StreamYard thing. I don't know what happened.
Okay, that's fine. So, to me, number one, at a certain point, you're just enriching weapons manufacturers.
Yeah.
Secondly, at the end of the day, we have $15 bacon right now, insane grocery prices.
Do you want to hear how insane gas prices are in LA?
Yeah.
I saw gas downtown Los Angeles yesterday for $8.44 a gallon.
Oh my God.
$8.44 a gallon downtown LA. Thank God I don't live downtown LA. It's a little cheaper by me at $6 a gallon, but I couldn't believe it when I saw that. I'm like,
Somebody just said $17 for a whole chicken. So at the end, we're hearing from Biden, we're out of funding for COVID. We can't really do anything on healthcare right now. We can't really do anything on climate. Blah 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 blah. Well, where's all this money? I mean, I know we become numb, but like $1 billion is a lot of money. $40 billion is a lot of money. By the way, this is paid for by taxpayers. Modern monetary theory. They're just printing this money. That's what So it's really, I feel for the people of Ukraine, but at a certain point, the people of Ukraine have to also be saying, hey, we don't want your weapons. We want this to end. We want, Jen Psaki, when asked, I think it was from Ryan Durham actually in the White House, what is the U.S. doing to try and expedite negotiation here? Mm-hmm. And Jen Psaki said, well, the U.S., of course, we empower Ukraine and the leader of Ukraine to negotiate. You empower Ukraine to negotiate. The United States should be working with Ukraine to end this. That doesn't mean Russia is not at fault. It is. I don't hear him pseudo leftists that it's really Zelensky's fault and Ukraine's fault that they were invaded Russia. I mean, that's just absurd. And
it is absurd. Listen, I mean, you can discuss the fact that there was a civil war going on without saying Putin had to invade on behalf of anybody on the eastern side. That's just bullshit. It's a bullshit argument. I agree with you.
Of course it is. But those people are getting tons of clicks off of that bullshit argument. I wonder
if any of these people have any integrity when it comes to just journalism, truth, any of that stuff. I don't know.
No, not at all. And by the way, to the one I was talking about, if you look back to his videos in 2020, he was basically talking like a resistance wine mom and screaming the dangers of Trump getting reelected. Does videos basically giving Tucker Carlson tongue baths. So, people change, shall we say. Anyway.
Or just where the money goes. I don't know.
Get a lot of views. God bless him. So I also wanted to show Marjorie Taylor Greene, which I thought was amazing about. She's indignant over us giving more money to Ukraine. Let's take a listen to her speech.
Plays right into America.
Iraq's opposition to Ukrainian supplemental bill, $40 billion. But there's no baby formula for American mothers and babies. An unknown amount of money to CIA in the Ukraine supplemental bill, but there's no formula for American babies and mothers. $54 million in COVID spending in Ukraine, but there's no formula for American babies and mothers. $900 million for nonprofits and organizations in Ukraine, but there's no formula for American babies and mothers. $8.7 billion for economic support and funding in Ukraine, but there's no formula for American mothers and babies. If it's about claiming that it's about saving lives, let's be real, then we hear about foreign countries like Ethiopia. So that's a bunch of hypocrisy because I never hear Ethiopia brought up here. Totally ignoring, completely ignoring our own border crisis, our own baby formula crisis, and brutal inflation, skyrocketing gas prices that no one can afford, but $40 billion Ukraine? Stop funding regime change and money laundering scams and U.S. politician cover-ups of their crimes in countries like Ukraine. The American people do not support paying for constant U.S. involvement in foreign affairs while our own government fails our own country. Let me remind everyone here, we swore an oath to...
Sorry, folks, I don't really know what the tech issue is. I see people saying it. I mean, it's coming up clear to me. So let us know if you hear us and see us. Okay. I don't know. Colin said it might be a connection issue. So what's amazing is Marjorie Taylor Greene is talking hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, here's from Newsweek, bought defense stock day before slamming profitable war in March. Marjorie Taylor Greene purchased stock in a major defense contractor just one day before sending a tweet that appeared to criticize profiting from war. A financial disclosure released on Monday shows that Greene, a Republican representing Georgia's 14th congressional district, purchased between $1,001 and $50,000 in Lockheed Martin on February 22nd, 2022. Oh, I love her speech. You know, the babies don't have the formula.
This is like a meme now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's not even.
But this is Jordan. Now, this is the Democratic Party once again handing the fascists a football, right? So once again, everything she's saying about income inequality, there not being gas is too expensive, no money for this, no money for that. This is just red meat, not only for her base, right? The QAnon right-wing extremists, the America First groypers, like all of those folks. It's also appealing to a lot of other folks that are hurting financially. They're suffering from income inequality. And once again, you have a left not giving a left exit to the income inequality. When is the Democratic Party going to stop doing this?
It's great. But I just wanted to point out because I saw some people like retweeting Marjorie Taylor Greene and like, yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Unironically.
Yeah, she's full of shit the same way. All of them are full of shit.
Do not retweet Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like, I mean, listen, a clock is right twice a day. Marjorie has made good points there, but she's absolutely a lunatic.
And full of shit.
And also a hypocrite. Yeah.
Yeah. She doesn't care about baby. She doesn't care about baby formula, any of that stuff. So
I mean, she was the keynote speaker at the America First thing, which is, if you don't know who America First is, Fuentes, groypers, these are neo-Nazis. Just stay away from her. She's bad news.
So, one more story before we go to call in. Andrew Yang Now I'm trying.
Every now and then he, hits the nail on the head. I have to say, it was really interesting to see this tweet storm he did.
You know what? I teased and I shouldn't have. I'm going to wrap just because people are saying the audio is unbearable. So what's the point?
It's unbearable?
Yeah, we might, something's wrong. I don't know if it's your end or my end, but we'll figure it out. So I'll do the Yang story another day. Tina and I are going over to Callin, where the audio will be good, to talk Roe v. Wade. Maybe we'll get into Yang too. So download the Callin app and then follow Status Coup. We'll be over there taking your calls in just a few minutes. Sorry for the audio issues here. We'll figure it out. And we'll see you over on Callin. Thanks, folks.